Hello and welcome to this Webflow live stream. My name is Aron Korenblit, and I'm so excited to be back with all of you at our regular 1 p.m. Eastern Wednesday time slot. Thank you again for coming back. It's been a while. We went on Webflow Conf, and I met a lot of you, and I'm excited to see you, some of you anyway, virtually here on the Webflow live stream. Extremely excited to be back. Who do we have in the chat? Drop me a hello in the chat. If you've never joined us before, you can go ahead and chat in the little chat dialogue. If you don't have access to it, you have to, I think, create a YouTube channel. So on the top right in the profile, create a channel. But super, super excited to be back. We've got Prem. We've got Isabel. Isabel, how are you? Hamza, hello. Welcome to joining us on this stream where we're going to talk about Spline. So we talked a lot of new features at Webflow Conf. One of the ones that got you all most excited, and we saw it in the chat before we joined, is 3D animations on websites. So I am super excited to have Gabor from the Spline team joining us today to show us how Spline works, show you how you can add 3D to your websites in Webflow, and how to animate those 3D scenes directly in Webflow. So that's our goal for today, giving you, everything you need to get started with Spline and build in Webflow. So we got some more folks. Hadi, welcome. Silas, welcome. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. Welcome from Germany. Appreciate you joining at this hour. Speaking of someone who's joining us at a late hour, without further ado, I'm super excited to welcome Gabor. Gabor, welcome to the Webflow live stream. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine, thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone. Yeah, it's like a pleasure to be here. I met Aron and all the Webflow team and lots of Webflow creators in the conference previously in London and New York, and yeah, it was super exciting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this session.
So it was great meeting you. Thank you for traveling with us to all the cities. Thank you to everyone who joined us in those cities and a lot of those in the chat. So Gabor, we're going to jump into what is Spline. We're going to start building. But for folks who maybe aren't familiar with Spline, how about we start there? What is Spline?
Yeah, sure. So basically, Spline is an easy-to-use 3D design tool that allows real-time collaboration directly in your browser. That means that you can go into the editor through the browser and create 3D content. But these 3D contents and results that are possible to make with Spline are not just prototypes, but they can be production-ready, interactive, web-based experiences. So you can easily integrate them into your websites, like through Webflow, for instance, which we will walk through today. And there's also a huge amount of possibilities with this. Like you could be building product showcases, interactive experiences, you could build some fun mini games, or you could just use it for your branding. And we also recently launched a very fun feature called 3D Gaussian Splats yesterday. So I recommend you to go check it out too. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Amazing. I'd love to know in the chat if you've built something with Spline in a Webflow website already. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'd love to highlight some throughout the stream, right? So if you've built something, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I know folks like Diego have been playing with Spline. I saw that on Twitter. So thank you all to the community for kind of, showing us what's possible. So Gabor, we're going to go through kind of the basics of Spline. We're going to go through integrating. Where do you think we should start, right? So we're going to jump into Webflow or Spline here in a moment, but set us up here. Where should we start and how should we go about learning Spline?
Yeah, so why are we doing all of this? Like, we would like to show you how you can create a very simple 3D experience that can be embedded into your website. And for this specific experience, we were thinking to make a simple to build scene that could be used for representing your brand with a very abstract kind of shape. So I would recommend to maybe just jump straight into the example that we have been preparing and just walk through it. So to see what does it mean and what we could be building with it.
Okay, so let's go into the screen share. I'm a big fan of just jumping in. Let's start building. So I'm here.
Yeah.
We've got this little, I don't know what a hairy ball that we're going to call this. So for folks who want to either follow along, who want to copy this for later, in the description, there's a link to the community page, and that has the Made in Webflow link to this, and it has the spline. So you can copy that. You can start playing with it. But our goal, if I understand you correctly, Gabor, is to recreate this, and we're going to call this, the hairball. That's what people are. So what do you see as a spline designer when you look at this? Like, how do you dissect this? How should I think about this?
Yeah. So basically, this website is kind of like an imaginary website. Like imagine it as like a blank canvas for your kind of ideas, and we try to showcase how the integration could work. And for that, we use the very prominent like visual kind of representation of this hairy ball in the hero section. We also made it interactive, and this hairy ball is consisting of like thousands of little hairs, like simple cube shapes, basically, that are cloned along the surface of the sphere, and we also animated it. But what we wanted to also make it a bit more immersive, and for that there are some kind of mouse events and scroll events linked to this object. So when we scroll, we zoom onto the object, and with that we can give like a background to our content on top of this object, so it's more readable. um, yeah, and it's quite interesting. You could scroll all the way down throughout the website. Yeah, and the perfect thing about like using Spline and Webflow is that you can actually sync up this scroll event and the Spline animation to
Mm.
match your 2D interface and your 3D content and create like a seamless experience.
Okay, so we have a ball, we have hairs. We're going to kind of color those hairs, bring that into Webflow, and then use Webflow animations to line up the spline with, what we want it to look like, or what kind of level of zoom or scale we want on Webflow. So I'm also realizing I'm losing my voice. We both have a cold today. So if
Yeah.
my voice sounds different, that's why. Okay, so where should we start? We have the ball, we have the hairs.
Yeah.
How do
So
we,
I would
you know,
recommend just to jump straight into Spline to the editor and start building this scene. Like the very first thing that we could do is actually recreate this little hair object
okay,
and then start from there.
okay. So I'm here. So what I did before, I just went into Spline, I created a scene,
Yeah.
and this is where folks would start. I,
Yeah.
you
This.
know, talk to me about this interface. How should I think about Spline?
Yeah. So in Spline, basically, when you create a scene, you have a kind of an empty viewport. You have a like basic primitive shape, a rectangle in the middle of your scene, and the directional light for you to just get started. And on the very left side, left sidebar, you can actually see these objects. So you could just go and remove the rectangles because that we don't need that. So if you click on it, yeah, you can easily remove those objects. And there all the objects you are creating, they will be visible on the left side. And when you have selected them, you can see that on the right-hand side, on the right sidebar, there are all sorts of parameters that you could tweak and play around with to actually adjust your objects. But you also have the possibility to directly manipulate it in the viewport itself. And on the top, we have like a toolbar with some basic shapes that you can use to get you started, like a cube or sphere or pen tool. So you can like build your objects and use some Boolean operations or some basic modeling. So yeah, there are plenty of like tools for you to get started. And if you are a first-time Spine user, I also recommend you to get used to the camera usage, right? Like Aaron, you are using a mouse, right? Yeah. So you can use both the mouse and the trackpad. There are some gestures and hints like how you can like easily rotate around the scene and kind of like translate from the 3D view even to a 2D view if you need to have like a very like frontal view because you are dealing with some precision and some detailed editing.
I'm worried
Yeah,
about
but
giving people kind of,
yeah,
car sickness because I've been practicing, but I'm not the best just yet. I saw you practice and it's much quicker. So we have this 3D, which is kind of different from working, in 2D, which is a little different. But okay, so
yeah,
we've got a sense of what we look like. We've got our CSS properties on the left. We've got our HTML on the left, and we've got our different elements at the top. How do
yeah.
we go about, uh, um, starting? Because I don't know how we get from
Yeah.
this to, this.
Yeah. So to be able to create that, we should be creating a cube first, and then maybe we should be creating like a rough prototype of our concept,
Hmm.
which would be just creating the little hair, which is a cube, and then clone it on the surface of a sphere. And so for
Okay.
that, I would ask you to just start with a cube object on the very top toolbar.
Oh, right here, cube.
Uh,
Yeah, got it.
yeah,
Okay, so
it's
let me
there.
drop a
Yeah.
cube. Let me drop it here. Okay, we've got our little cube. Okay,
Yeah,
so
and for
yeah,
this one, we use the specific size to be able to have this kind of hair effect. We should be
right.
using like other dimensions for that one. You could either like manipulate the object in the viewport itself, as you have been dragging it already with the bounding
Hmm.
boxes. But we know that we need a specific size of a cube that's like 10 by 100 by 10. So at the shape property,
Right,
you
right
can
here.
directly
So
input, yeah, the size
okay,
itself.
so we want it to be. Let me just see. 100. What does that give us? Like that. Okay, so that's the width on X. So maybe we want 1,000 here on Y. Maybe yeah. There we go. Something a little higher. Maybe that's too high. 500.
Mm, just 100, yeah. I would
100.
recommend like 10 by 100 by
Oh,
10.
10. Okay, got it, got it. Let's scale
Yeah.
this down. So 10 by 100 by 10. Okay, let's zoom in. I'm
Perfect.
using
Yeah.
the little command. Whoops.
Yeah.
Oh, that
And you
undid
can
everything.
see
There we
that
go.
by default we have some kind of like corner radius applied on the cube.
Right.
But we don't need that for this one because we are going to clone the cube like many times, and we want to make sure it's efficient. And the more corner radius you have, the more polygons the object will be
Got it.
consisting of, which will be like resulting in a high resolution object. But for now, yeah, we have the cube object, and I think if you look at the example, we actually have kind of a hidden sphere in the middle of that scene.
Yeah, let me
I would
yeah.
like you to create that sphere
Okay.
roughly in the same size
Okay, so add a
compared to
sphere.
the yeah,
I'm a professional.
yeah, it's pretty similar to creating just a cube, right? So you just click there or drag it in the viewport,
And
and
what kind of size do we want? So if this is 10 by 100 by 10, do we want this to be 20 by
uh,
20 by 20?
oh, that would be very tiny, right? Like we would like to make
Oh,
like
right.
in proportion. If you look at the example, the hairs are smaller and the sphere is pretty huge. So we could be looking into something like 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000.
Okay,
So for
let's
the
try
X
that.
and Y and Z, we can create like a uniformly scaled sphere. And
There
mm,
we go. Let's zoom out. Okay, so we've got our sphere.
yeah,
And I've got, if I hide, okay, it's right here, right? So hide that, and I've got my little cube in the middle.
uh-huh, yeah.
Cool.
And now actually you have the cube selected. And in order to be able to achieve the effect that we have on the scene, right? Like we have more than 1,000 little hairs
Mm-hmm.
like cloned on the surface of the sphere. Previously, you would have to actually manually go and copy paste those many objects and then place them, one by one, which would be like a very tedious work to do so. But luckily, we have a tool that solves for this case, which is called the cloner. So you can easily clone these little hairs on the surface of the sphere by actually turning on that tool. Yeah, that
Okay,
that one there, right
so we're
there.
gonna clone
Yeah,
this little
maybe,
cube
maybe,
onto the
yeah.
sphere multiple times, then kind of position it somehow.
Yeah, maybe for demonstration purposes, you could like turn off the sphere for now and
Okay.
zoom in on the cube itself.
Yeah.
You can see that by default, it's like applying a linear clone. If you start dragging the,
Oh, right here. Yeah. If
uh,
I start doing this. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah,
I see
you
we're
see that it's
cloning.
like linear cloning, but we would like to have a different kind of pattern, right? Like we would like to use the sphere. So at the very top in the cloner section, you have an
Right.
option for that. Like for the type, you could specify an object that you want to actually. Yeah, that one, right.
Okay.
Cool.
So you're saying let's go ahead and take the clone type object and then clone onto the sphere.
Yes,
Oh, cool.
exactly. Oh, pretty cool. But actually,
But actually,
we should. I think we need to adjust it slightly. If you look at our like final result, I
yeah.
think the sphere should be slightly smaller,
Right.
but we should also probably align those little clones so they actually stick out from the
Right.
sphere
Okay.
to
So
have this
first,
hairy ball effect.
to make the sphere small, let's make it, let's say 250 by 250. So I went into sphere, I went into size, which is a property. Okay, that feels better. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll adjust that. And then yeah, you're right. We're kind of wrapping the clones onto the sphere. How do we make them stick out?
Yeah, for that we need to change the orientation of those cubes. So just select the cube itself, and there's a property Oh, actually, you can turn back on the spheres because otherwise we won't see
Oh, right,
the
right, right,
result,
right, right.
right?
Okay, so here,
So,
oh,
pretty cool.
axis,
Yeah.
the axis of the clone. So that was Y. Oh, there we go. Haha.
Yeah. Why?
Nice.
And so in the final result, we see that we have much more volume and much more objects, right? So we can just easily crank up the clone amount. There's a specific property for that.
Right. So yeah, the count. So
And
let's do what, like 500? Okay. I mean, even
we
more.
1000, yeah, I because
1000?
these are pretty simple shapes. Yeah,
There we go.
we
Okay.
can go more crazy about it. Yeah, if you
So we're
have
getting
more
closer. Yeah.
complex shapes, then you have to be more conservative with the clones. But these are just cubes, so it's pretty fine there. All right. So yeah,
It
we have a
feels like a
rough
little that
prototype.
these are
Yeah,
not as randomly placed.
yeah, that's right.
How do we, does that make sense? Like it seems like this is a little more uniform in terms of placement on the
Yeah,
sphere. How would I go about, do you think like we should randomize? Like what do you think is the next step to kind of get this a little closer?
yeah. So in order to be able to randomize their position, rotation, or scale, we have
Mm,
a specific tool on top of the cloner, which you can find in the right sidebar. It's called the randomness.
okay. Oh,
And
okay.
with that, yeah, you can basically just start randomizing those objects with different kinds of properties. And I would recommend you to, because you've seen in the example that their Y position is actually varied, right? So we
Right.
would like to play around with the Y position and Y scale properties in order to have this more hairy effect.
Okay. So what we want to be randomized is the scale, the Y scale and the Y position. So we want some
Yeah.
of them to be a little lower and then some of them a little higher. So so do I set, okay, here we go. So
Y-
I just increase the
Yeah.
rent, like the, oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You're getting there. Yeah. I
Okay.
think.
And then maybe just a little bit on the position, because that's just kind of accentuating the randomness of the Y because it's going into and out of the sphere. Okay, that's maybe a little too much. How does that feel? We're not going to get exactly close, but close enough.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
That's
And
actually pretty cool.
if we look at the example that we prepared, we see that there's a much more interesting color applied. We did a trick there where we made a sense of depth and kind of like it's getting darker towards its like lower end, like
Yeah, let
when
me
it's
zoom
getting
in.
closer to the sphere. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
and
it's like blue in the middle and then kind of pink on top, which
purplish
is my,
blue. Yeah,
yeah, with my summary knowledge of colors.
yeah.
Uh, okay.
So in like a traditional 2D tools, you have a typical like gradient
Mm-hmm.
kind of option where you can go from color A to color B. But for Spline, we have something called the 3D gradient, or in other words, it's called the depth material layer, which allows you to actually do these kind of transitions with the colors on your object, which is pretty fascinating to play
So
around
the
with.
the gradient is going to be on our hairs, which will kind of be affected to the sphere. So we should apply that gradient to the base cube,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, right. So if you have the cube selected, on the right hand side, you see that there is a material section. That's where you can play around with material layers. If
Yeah,
you
right
scroll
here.
down a bit, yeah, we have a basic like light, which will influence the appearance of your materials. And you, by default, it just has a boring gray color. But we would like to make it more fun. So for that, you could just actually click that little drop down on the color kind of
Right here.
not
Oh,
that
right
one,
here on
but
the right.
the second layer. I mean, the
Oh, sorry, on
color
the color.
layer.
Yeah, you're totally right. Sorry. Yeah. Whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa.
and the drop down. You can change that layer to something different because we don't know the color. Don't need the color one, but we would like to play around with the depth. That's the
Oh, depth.
second
Okay,
option
yeah.
there.
So kind
Yeah,
of that gradient style. Okay, cool, cool. So I changed the type of material that we're applying to depth.
yeah.
And then by clicking here, I have all of the different options. Okay, now me as both a design noob and a Spline noob, I'm going to rely on you. How should I
All
even
right.
think about everything here?
All right. So basically, as I mentioned, the analogy of 2D gradients, this is pretty similar, but you can think about it in the 3D space, right? Like that's why you have those controls there, which you can play around with. So basically, right now you don't really see the effect because it's like cut off. You would need to actually drag its inner radius. So actually the gradient is applied more towards the object. And for
Right.
that, there's that little triangle,
Right here?
yeah, that one, right? And that one you need to drag all the way towards the very center of the cube,
Oh, the center. Okay,
right?
because we want that to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
applied to the set. Like we want that
So
gradient. Okay, cool.
yeah, yeah. So we see that the gradient more. Yeah, yeah. You can drag it all the way towards the center, and then the other end is also out of the view, right? So that means that it is only capturing a tiny part of the gradient itself. So for
Oh, right
that,
here.
yeah, that one.
Okay,
For
got it.
that,
Oh,
you
I
can
can
just
see now that the black is
yeah,
coming to the top because I'm pushing the edge of the gradient in, so it's very white in the middle. And then what
exactly,
if
yeah,
how about we set some colors so we folks can kind
yeah,
of see what should so the middle we're gonna try to get us close. So the middle, what is the middle looks blue? What would you define? Like, how do I find that color
yeah. So for that, you can just use the color ramp and use some kind of mm, yeah. Let's try to play around with it and pick a color there. Yeah, it's getting there. I think we might need a more like kind of towards the pink or red for this initial color, because this is the main color, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then towards the ends we have like a darker color applied, and that one could be a more dark or even darker. Yeah, you can drag that down a bit towards the black, so it has the sense of depth when we will clone these objects.
Nothing
uh,
terrifies me more than picking a color in front of 50 designers. I'm sure people, if you have thoughts about the color, let me know in the chat. I am all ears. I do not have a strong opinion here.
this is
Uh,
something, yeah, yeah, we can always adjust in post too. That's the
mhm.
fun part about it. So just get the rough idea there, and yeah, I would recommend you to get it even a bit darker, maybe.
On the end, yeah. Let's go
Yeah.
here. Let's do that.
What you could do now is maybe you could turn on the cloner back, or the sphere itself back, its visibility, so we see the result on the sphere, and we can start playing around with these colors there directly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can
So
look, we can keep playing with the color, but
yeah,
see what the impact is on the actual sphere.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Now it looks like we
So
have a little more pinkish at the end and blue in the middle.
yeah, I think we made it the wrong direction. So you could just flip those two color ends, so it's dark towards the end and bright towards the outer
Can,
part.
can we just take a moment to appreciate this little animation right here, where when you flip it, yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
that's a
that's
design award right there. That's really cool. Okay, so let's
yeah,
flip
that's
those
pretty
to
cool.
you. Okay, so now it does look pinkish and much darker in the middle. So I think we're getting closer, but it feels like there's something about the sphere that radiates out this blue, right? I don't want to spend, 30 minutes here, but let's get maybe one more
Yeah.
thing closer and then we can do the little bringing into Webflow.
Yeah, I think one more easy trick you could do is to give the sense of the depth more prominent. Is that also change the color of the sphere itself in the
Okay.
middle,
So
and
sphere, we're going to go into material. I've been following.
and
How do
just
I,
yeah,
yeah,
just
set
a
a color.
simple color. Yeah, it could be a simple color, and you can just use the color picker
Yeah, maybe
and maybe
something.
pick, or yeah, or do it manually too.
Yeah, the dark gives it a little, like a black kind of gives it a little bit of reality, if you will, right? It feels like there's something there. So that feels about right.
Yeah.
I think let's continue here. And then,
Yes.
once we've brought it into Webflow, we've done our little animations, we can play around, as you call post, which I like this idea that there's a production and a post production.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else do we, when I look at this, okay, there's a few things that are different, right? We don't have that little up down movement.
Mhm.
We don't have it in Webflow. We don't have the animation. What do you think we need to do now? So, like, what sequence of steps should we take here?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things missing, right? Like one is animating these objects so they feel more organic, like
Mm-hmm.
this hairy ball feels much more organic. And then two would be actually embedding and bringing it to Webflow so we can give a rough sense of how does it feel like and look like in our template that we prepared.
Okay, so let's first start with this. What looks like animating the hairs, having
Yeah.
them grow and grow back, and then we'll import into Webflow or bring into Webflow. So, how do I say, hey, I want this little dude to go up and then down and then up and then
Mhm.
down permanently?
Yeah, so for that, basically, if you scroll down, the cube is selected, and you scroll down to the randomness section, we have kind of a little magic property called the movement,
Yes.
which will apply the noise in different kind of ways, which will result
Right.
in different randomness, right? And we would like to basically animate this parameter from one state to the other one and create a continuous loop, so it's being
Mm,
animated continuously, and we will get this seamless kind of animation which
got it.
will just make it
So we
visually
want
move,
to
right?
have a you know, step 0 is 1, and then step 2 is 2,
Yeah.
and then back to 1, and then back to 2. Okay, that sounds right. So let's maybe set it to 2, maybe even like
Yeah.
1, 1.5. And how do I say, okay, start here and then go to 2?
So every object has states, right? If you scroll to the very top, it's pretty similar to how Webflow works.
Mm-hmm.
You could define two different states to your object. If you click on that little plus icon at the state section, and now you have the base state and the second state. The second state is automatically selected for you. So now you can go forward and adjust the parameter because the base state saved the initial
Oh, I
value.
see.
We had it like 1.5-ish. And for the second state that you just created, you can go and crank it up to something like 3, or yeah, this is something that you can always play around
Yeah,
with.
let's go
How this?
3. Yeah, sure. Let's just input 3. That feels about right. And
Yeah.
then, okay, so base state, we have 1.5. State, we have 3. How do we go, say, okay, go from base to state, back to base, back to state?
Yeah, so for that, we have something called the event system, which can actually transition between these two states. For the events, you could just create a simple event. There are plenty of events, but for now, for today, we would just like to use the very simple event that's called start, which will actually, when you start this scene and you play this
Mm,
scene when it's embedded somewhere, it will initiate some kind of action.
okay.
And we have plenty of actions, like you could do things like play a sound, or I don't know, create an object, remove an object, but we would like to use the transition one, right? So we can easily transition between the two states.
Okay, so we're saying start this event, not on any kind of things that happen in the scene itself, just
Yeah.
like page load would be the equivalent, in Webflow.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then what we want to do is transition in states of the cube.
Hmm.
So
And
yeah,
yeah,
go
we
ahead.
should there like pick the two states we want to transition in between. So the very first one, smoother transition between the two states.
Okay, so we lost Gabor for a second, but Gabor's back. Everyone, you can see it in the
Oh,
chat.
I'm
Everything is
sorry.
good. It's okay.
All right.
Gabor, it's 7 p.m. where he is. He's very late. We apologize for that, but we are back. Okay,
All right.
appreciate everyone in the chat. Appreciate that. Okay, so where we lost you, we said our
Hmm.
transition is going to go from base state to state. There's by default a kind of delay, right?
We don't need the delay, right? So we should just
Exactly.
actually tweak the property in between the base state and state, which is saying 1. That means that it's like transitioning for 1 second.
Oh,
But
I
we would
see.
like
So
to
this right
do
here is the duration.
longer.
So
Yeah.
maybe like 7 seconds right here.
Yeah.
Like, so go
And we
from
could
base state.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, we could also change the ease out and ease in to linear, because we would like to create a seamless loop. So there's like no easing at the end and the beginning of the transition.
Okay. So we're
So
saying take 7
yeah,
seconds, transition between M1.5 and M3 linearly, and then we want to loop infinitely.
infinitely for sure. Yeah.
And the cycle, right? We want to ping pong, right? So go.
Yes. So it can go back and forth. Yeah.
Okay. How do we? Okay. Do we just close out and play?
Yeah, you can just go ahead and preview it with the play.
Cool.
Right.
That's really cool, actually. Let me see if it maps. Okay, that actually maps. This one feels a little slower. So just a tad bit slower. So maybe we just go
It's
back
mhm.
and let's give it 9 seconds. Okay, there we go. Let's play that. Okay, that feels about right. We're very close to this. Okay. Do you feel like we're ready to bring this into Webflow?
Yeah, I think the fun part about the Webflow integration is that at any point of time you can bring it there. And if you forget about something, you could just go back to Spline and do some updates and push an
Okay.
update. And so you can iterate with the help of both tools, right? For
Okay.
your desired goal.
So right before we export, I forgot to tell everyone there is a discount in the description, Webflow Friends for Spline. Also, at the top of the chat, you can drop your name, your email, so you can be notified about Webflow live streams. Also, it adds your name to the stream credits, which are always a lot of fun. So make sure to do that. Okay, so how do I prepare this to be importable or bring into Webflow?
Yeah, so in order to bring it there, we need to use the Spline integration on Webflow, which requires kind of a URL of your scene, an exported URL that can be copy pasted to Webflow, and then it will be there. So for that, yeah, we need to go to export it. And within the export, we have a bunch of options. But for this specific integration, we should be using the viewer, the second option on the left sidebar. And now we generated the URL for us, which is the very top URL, which you can, yeah, just simply copy and bring it to Webflow. So now if you would jump into our Webflow environment,
Of course.
whoa.
It's okay. I'll take a minute here. Apologize here. Let me go into. You're gonna have to say a joke or something.
All right.
Give me 2 seconds. This is
Aaron is
my.
hiding his password. Yeah. We don't have access to all of the cool templates he has.
Exactly. Let me go into here. All right. We take security very seriously here at Webflow. Okay, we are back. Look at that. Shout out to the IT team for making that very easy.
Awesome.
Okay,
All right.
so let me go ahead
So,
and what I already have set up here is I have in the main container, I have a sticky element, which is where I want to place the spline embed, right? So let me go ahead and add spline scene. Now, Vlad did this live on stage. Vlad is much better at Webflow than I am, so do not expect as many jokes or as good of a flow. Okay, so how do I go about adding spline, the one we just created?
yeah,
Go
so
into s-
basically this kind of spline embed, yeah, has a URL property. And that's where you just need to simply paste the URL that we grabbed from Spline, right?
So right
That one, yeah.
here, let's bring that in. Okay.
Okay, there it is.
Okay. Let
Pretty
me
cool.
set some. I think we had some. Okay, we just set with 100 absolute, so it's kind of stickies. There we go.
Yeah, so
But
it's
it gives
always
us
in
that
the
brown
background.
little, yeah, the little
Mhm.
gray. How do we remove that?
Yeah, so by default, it actually applies a background from Spline, right? And we should be actually turning it off on the Spline side, where within the export options, I forget to mention that when you are exporting your Spline scene, you have a bunch of options that you can tweak to actually adjust the behavior of your spline scene. And in the play settings, we are searching for that specific setting called the background color, where you can just quickly hide it. And now you need to push an update, which is the big blue button at the top. And with this, we actually updated our scene, and we should be seeing the result in a second if we
There we
reload
go.
it on Webflow. Cool. Yeah, the
Cool.
background got removed. Yeah.
Okay, so that was actually, wow, that was actually relatively simple. So what I did there is I updated the viewer on the spline side. I reloaded the scene in Webflow. So now we have our floating a hairball. Now the difference is okay. So we don't see the little. If I preview this, will I see the little? Oh, we do see the little. Okay, so we do have our
Hmm.
events from Spline. They only appear when we're in preview mode. So we do
Hmm.
have the hair. So now what we want is we want to zoom in or make the ball bigger as we scroll in. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, for that, I think we should actually adjust the composition slightly in Spline
Mm.
because we see that it's slightly off, like it's in the middle, but it's not as immersive as in our example that we prepared. And for that, we actually just can tweak the camera on the Spline scene to make it align more in that kind of yeah angle
Yeah.
and direction
So
that we need to. Yeah.
yeah, right now we are looking at the ball from afar. We want to kind of be looking at the ball from just above and as if we're like almost touching it. So when we exported, we say, hey, take the point of view that we're currently looking at the ball, right? But we
Yeah.
have this kind of like, how do I add a different point of view?
Yeah, but for that, you can just basically create a new camera and adjust its point of view. So by default, you have something called the personal camera, which is great for editing. It's at the very bottom, which is your personal camera is great for editing, but for your personal or for your final exports, you might want to use a specific camera that you can tweak and set up and then even lock so you accidentally don't actually touch it or move it to the wrong location. That one, right?
Okay.
And now you could just click the use this camera, and you see that, yeah, now jumped into that camera specifically. And to be able to center the camera on the object, you could just select the sphere itself on the right sidebar, and
Yeah.
I think there's a keyboard shortcut called S, which will auto center it.
S. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So
Okay.
now it's more perfectly in the center. But now, if you go back and adjust the camera properties, you could basically, first of all, I would recommend you to go with the perspective, because by default we are using orthographic projection mode, which is more flat, right? Like it's more even, but with perspective you have a sense of depth and like perspective, so it can be more bold and more interesting. And now you could just zoom into your subject and try to slightly position it. You could, yeah, do it with
So
the
stupid question. How do I
camera.
zoom in? Like, what do I
Yeah.
move? Do I get closer? Do I scale up how should I think about zooming in on a 3D plane?
Mm. Yeah, so for that, maybe we can just use basically the properties of the camera. So imagine this like having an actual physical camera and you are just
Right.
getting more up close to your subject, right? So in order to do that, maybe we should be facing this object from the very front, so we have more precision over those properties. And for that, there's like a little orientation cube at the very bottom of
Right here.
the, yeah, that one. And yeah, I would recommend you to touch the or click that little red axis,
Red.
which will actually make
Okay.
it jump to the very front. Yeah.
Okay, now we're
And
okay, that makes sense. So now I'm like facing the object
yeah,
itself and I can
frontal.
say,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's get closer to the object."
Yeah. Yeah. And now you could just go and adjust the position of the object so you can get more up close. It, because of the specific orientation, I'm not sure which is it, like X, Y, or
X,
Z.
yeah. So X
Yeah,
brings there
X.
we
Yeah,
go.
there we go.
Okay, so that makes a
But we
lot more
should
sense.
also move the camera slightly or actually slightly up, so our shape is more cropped and more like
Yeah, like
halfway
let's
in the
go
view.
maybe 100 here. There we go. Maybe a little bit less than that. Okay. So there's some great questions in the chat. Drop the questions in the chat, and we're gonna have a Q&A in about 5 minutes once we do the kind of zoom in. So if you have any questions about Spline, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and Gabor is more than happy to do some live Q&A. We'll just do the zoom in, right,
Okay.
in Webflow, and then I'll let the side by side as homework for everyone on the next live stream.
Yeah,
Cool.
for
So
sure.
now
Yeah.
if I
So yeah,
re-export it, it's gonna take it from this camera because I've set camera as my export, correct?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So it's update the zoo. So if I go here and I go back to my spline scene, let me go find that in the finder, spline scene. Boom. Always a little tricky to get out of here. There we go. Then reload. Okay. It still feels like
Yeah.
we could zoom in even more.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could adjust the camera, right? So
Yeah, maybe just a little bit more. I'll do this as a last step here.
okay,
Where would we zoom
it's
in
the
here?
X, right? You need to
It's the
crank
X,
up
yeah.
the X.
Yeah, so let's go here.
Yeah. And
And
then
then
maybe push it down on the Y a little bit. Push it down
there,
so
yeah, there we go.
so the title is visible. You can push it down a bit more
Even
too,
more?
because yeah, your hero is having a similar aspect ratio. Yeah, around, yeah, around that. But yeah, of course, this could be adjusted in post to
Yeah, I
like
think we can. Okay, that actually looks perfect. Okay,
that's
so
much better.
so what we want now is on scroll. We want we want the camera to move in.
Or yeah, it's actually relative, right? Like you could either scale up the object or you could move with the camera even closer or more up close. But for this exercise, I would recommend to actually to create a Webflow scroll event where we would actually just scale up the object depending on the scroll position of the website, right? So
Okay. So
you
as the
must be a
main
better,
container
yeah.
scrolls, so let's
Hmm.
go ahead and create the interaction. So we want to create while scrolling in view, right, on the main
Exactly.
container, right? We want to play scroll animation. Let's create a new one. We're going to call this Spline Scroll Live. And let's kind of imagine what this looks like. So what do we want to happen, right? So let's select our
Yeah.
spline.
Yeah, you need to select it so it appears in the drop down, right? So now it should be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're saying and change properties of the spline based on what percentage of the scroll we're on. So I guess we want to start this maybe like here. If we look here, like, right, so the scroll starts maybe right when the heroes, like here maybe.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
at around
31.
20% should be good. Yeah,
Okay, let's
maybe
go 31.
31.
And
Yeah.
okay, so how do we actually say move the camera in or increase the size?
So basically, from Webflow, you have access to all of the spline objects, right? And you can manipulate their position, scale, and rotation. And that's at the very bottom section. So now you have that specific state selected, pretty similar to how we have states in Spline,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you can just select the objects that you would like to manipulate from the drop down, right? And we would like to actually manipulate the sphere itself. So it's scaling up on scroll so we can get more up close to it. And at the very beginning, its scale should be just 1 by 1 by 1 at X and Y and Z. So we have its default scale
Okay, so
until
here the
this.
first ones are position. So we're not moving
Yeah.
the sphere, and the bottom ones are scale. We're saying, okay, our base state is 1, right? So this
Yeah.
is the way we load it is the base size we want it to be. And as a next step, as we lower that kind of, we go down the main container, we want the scale to increase, right? So
Yes.
right here at 100, maybe, I don't think we do it at 100. Where do we, let's go. Yeah,
I
we kind
think
of
the
stop
good,
here.
yeah, the good thing about the Webflow integration is that with the live preview, you could see the result live and align it perfectly based on your other HTML based content, right? So
Right.
over there, yeah, it should be around there. And we can go ahead and just crank up the scale to maybe like 3x. So we make it 3 times bigger.
Okay.
And now if you turn on the live preview, oh, you forget to actually select the object on the
Oh, right. I
second.
forgot here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
You
actually
need to
want to,
select the exactly same object. So there's a transition
okay, let's
happening
preview
between the
this.
two.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's actually watch this on live. Okay, so I'm here. Probably need to
Yeah.
move down the camera a little bit so we're not hiding the H1,
Yeah.
but that's something we know how to do. And
Yeah.
as we, so see, this is where it starts, that scale, then it linearly increases to this right here. All right.
Yeah.
But
I
see, we
think
want
we
to
went,
probably end it a little
yeah.
too, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's
We
adjust
went
that.
too much inside the sphere, and that's why we see more like visually less interesting areas of it.
All right,
So
let's go
maybe like
2.
2x would be enough. Yeah, there,
Yeah,
or
and then
you
we
can
still
see it
see
live,
the
right?
sphere and then the little hairs. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
let's save that. Let's. All right, I think we did it.
Awesome.
So I will leave as homework for everyone. Go ahead and get the clonable and then redo this, which is just based on the XY position of the mouse, change the
Yeah.
rotation of the sphere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we did it. So now's a good time, folks. Drop your questions for Gabor in the chat. There are already some. I want to highlight them. Make sure Gabor answers all of your questions. Go ahead and get the clonable. Make sure to copy paste the coupon Webflow Friends, and go ahead and drop your name and email in the form so you can show up in the credits and see what title you get today. So there are some questions in the chat. I do want to. There was one. I'm not. Now we have a little fancy. I can actually. Let me go up
Hmm.
So great question. I'm going to take this one first. Right. So Gabor, the question is, what is the best way to learn to create 3D models and shapes in Spline? So what should people do right after this stream that are really excited to learn Spline? Where should they go?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I would recommend you to actually start simple and get started with the very simple kind of modeling tools that we have inside Spline. But for that to learn them, you might need to follow some kind of tutorials. So we have YouTube tutorials on our Spline account, but that might be maybe a bit more time consuming. So before you do that, it's also pretty cool to just open up the library of Spline. There are plenty of templates that you can get started with and play around with, and just kind of study the objects, like how they are built. If you double click them, you will see how they're actually being modeled. If you go into that kind of modeling mode, and you will see how to create a more complicated shape. And we also have the community right on Spline, where there are plenty of great works and projects being shared by the community, and they are remixable most of the time, so you can just grab them and study them too. And yeah, I think we also have some docs, right? So the docs, if you are more into like reading kind of style of learning, then you could also learn from there.
Okay. Next question is, how does mobile work? So how would you work a spline scene or a 3D in mobile, across different breakpoints? Let's not jump into, but just talk to us through how should folks think about mobile responsiveness?
Hmm. Yeah, so basically we want to make sure that every spline scene is optimizable for all sorts of devices and runs smoothly in browsers, right? So mobile is definitely one of our focuses too. And for that, we just recently, a couple of months ago, launched a new event called the Screen Resize event, where you could just define your breakpoints, and based on some breakpoints, you can basically rearrange your objects or create a transition, or maybe zoom more up close or further away with your camera. And the fun part about it is that you could just match those breakpoints that you create with Spline with your Webflow breakpoints. So they actually are smoothly behaving together. But by default, you might not even need to worry about this, because our camera by default is responsively set up. So it's adjustable
Hmm.
for different screen sizes. But if you need to get more precision, or there is like a 3D text element that you want to make sure it's getting into the right location on mobile, you can just do that with the screen resize event.
Got it. Okay, great question from Zach. What are some best practices for optimizing and reducing scene size? And is there a way to reduce polygons? What would you as a pro recommend where folks thinking about speed optimization?
All right, so speed optimization, that's a great topic there too. For that, the easiest thing to get started with, we have a tool called performance. If you are going to about export your scene and scroll down in that little export panel, there is a little button that's called run test. And if you click that, it will actually benchmark your scene and show you how many objects it has, how many polygons it has, how many materials, slides, all sorts of things you are using. And we'll try to give you some hints and tips like what you could optimize. Like for instance, like one of the kind of like common mistakes is that some people crank up the subdivision level of their objects by default, and you don't really visually see the difference if you would just crank it down. And so the model doesn't need to be always that high res. But you can also yeah, use tricks like, instead of copy pasting the same object multiple times, you could use our components and instancing system. If you are using instances, those kinds of objects are quicker to load, right? So, and on top of that, we also have some kind of, we want to make sure that by default Spline is also automatically helping you compressing your content. And for that, we have specific settings where you could basically opt for high quality, or maybe opt for performance. So there's some kind of optimization happening. So it's even quicker to load and quicker to render everything there. But for all of this, yeah, the recommend to read the docs that we have. We have a specific documentation just for performance that we recently also updated. And there you could learn more.
All right. So there was a question around, should you use 3D, if your target audience has slow internet speed. I think what I'm hearing from you is,
Mm,
optimize no matter what, whether you're
mm,
building for super fast, high speed users or slower, if you absolutely
Oh,
want to use 3D, the same recommendation is always to optimize no matter what.
yeah, and a very good analogy there is with video, right? So in the beginning of the internet, we also started to embed like huge or different kinds of videos, and there you also need to make sure that they are like efficiently compressed and you don't go like too high resolution, so they can smoothly run. And yeah, so I think it's possible or feasible to, if you keep your scenes lightweight, they should be running smoothly even on lower end devices. But it depends on the complexity. We also see lots of people like importing huge models, and then they don't really understand why it's not performant enough. So if you would build something from scratch with Spline, then maybe you have more finer control over the final performance and the resolution of your objects there. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I think we answered most of the questions. Gabor, before you sign off, what should people do? Where can they get more Spline, more Vue, more learning? How do they keep on the Spline train?
To keep on the Spline train, yeah, I recommend to yeah, basically join our Discord channel. There is like lots of great like ongoing chat happening with the community, where we are continuously sharing the latest features and discussing and debating about those. And you can also ask for some help or look for some inspiration. But we also have the built-in community within Spline, where you can just share your work, put some comments on others' works, and get inspired by our gallery. If you would go to our community and explore the trending tab, then you also see like very high quality results being built by the community, which is, I think, pretty fascinating. So I would recommend to go there and get started. And maybe you could also use the Webflow Friends coupon, but Spline is for free too. Like every tool and feature, or most of the features, are accessible for you to get started. But if you actually want to do something in production and like apply it to like an actual client work, then I hope that this coupon can help get you started too.
Fantastic. Well, Gabor, thank you so much for joining. I am now on the Spline train. I hope everyone else will. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't wait to see what you will be building next with Spline and Webflow.
Yeah. All
Thanks
right.
for
Well, thank
having
you
me
so
here.
much. Yeah, we'll have you back. We're gonna, start building. Thank you so much. And now, for our favorite part, thank you, Gabor. Let's get into our credits here. All right. It's been a while. Hello. Thank you so much for joining. So hopefully, if I've set this up correctly, there we go. Thank you so much. We've got Mohammed, Chris, who are cutest cats. We have Pixel Geek. We have Lee from our Boba Fett clones. I think that's from. We've got. I gotta read this. Davey. We got too many folks. Ines, thank you. Pablo, Nadir, Sarah, Ryan, Penny, classic. Thank you so much, Penny, for joining. We've got Max, Zach, Vanessa. Thank you all. We'll be back in 2 weeks where I'm going to show you how to localize your websites with Joanna Wong from our technical architects team. Thank you so much for joining. And I'll be back here in 2 weeks to talk about localization. Thanks so much and have a great week. Bye, everyone.